To know what you are, you must know what you are not. Virginia Woolf.
Based on all the recommendations from viewers, I recently read a book called Class by Paul Fussell. Even though it was written in the 1980s, it still does a pretty good job of explaining a lot of the socio-cultural and economic differences between the classes and how different Americans of different social classes perceive each other. And really the question I'm going to address in this video is, what social class are you in? And how do you identify it? Because a key to being able to move up the class ladder or to maintain your place in the class ladder is to figure out where you are. It's like driving without a map. Like, sure, you can get places, but if you don't know where you are, you don't know where you need to go. And so that's what this video is going to hopefully explain to you. For those in the establishment elite, they know who they are. They don't really need the help of this video. For the rest of you, this video I think will be very useful. First, let's look at your relationship to your means of survival. If you are primarily relying on charity, whether through private charity or this government welfare programs, and it's from people outside of your own family, you are in the dependent class. Are you able to produce enough in terms of work, or do you have enough assets to live off of that you can support yourself or your family can support you without the help of the charity of others? If the answer is no, you're in the underclass. That's pretty simple. If you are in the precariat class, see my video on genteel poverty. But basically, you have a job, but no matter how well you manage your spending, you basically break even. And there's really no way you can materially change that given your circumstances. That is in the working class and the precariat class. Like, you make enough money that you can support yourself and maintain a basic lifestyle, but you are one job loss away from homelessness. That is the working class. Middle class is the people who have a little bit more stability than the working class, but their income is primarily derived from employment for somebody else. So if you have like a cushy corporate job or you've moved up in the world, even if it's a more blue collar role, and you make enough that you do have savings left over, but you don't have enough assets that you can live off of those independently for several years. You might be able, until retirement age, of course. Like, part of the middle class is being able to save enough that you can live in retirement off of your assets you've saved from working for a whole career. But in your younger life, you have a buffer, but not a buffer that can last you your rest of your adult life. And your income is still dependent on your employer. You have some upside if you do better at your job or move up the ranks, but you don't really have any control of increasing your income beyond asking for a raise or a promotion. And that's really the middle class / the clerical class. Basically, the poor, according to Fussell, and I agree with him, see your class based on how much money you have. The middle class see your class based on what profession you have and what your level of education is, because that's kind of what differentiates them between them and the precariat and the underclasses. Whereas the upper classes see their difference in their values, whether it's their values, their manners, how they see the world. Like, it doesn't matter necessarily how much money you have. You can be broke, but still have an upper class demeanor by how you behave and whether your belief on how abundant money is. And not really simply just like the secret go, like, I can manifest it. No, but just like, do you have like the connections and the skills to be able to get yourself back on your feet? And people in the upper class have that more than people in the lower classes. And the independent classes, their income is made through their own clientele, whether they're running a private practice or their previous profession, or they have a business with several employees. Essentially, their income is diversified. It's not from a single source. It's from a series of clients and customers. And the more broad-based your customer base is, the more secure your income is as a professional class person. And then the counter elites, they have enough money that they can either sell their business and have establishment elite level lifestyle indefinitely, or their business generates enough cash flow and they have basically made themselves redundant by hiring every people to fill every critical role of the company that they no longer have to work. That's counter elite. And the institutional classes, it's really just, that is really differentiated on income and education, like more advanced, more prestigious degrees, working at more prestigious companies and having higher salaries kind of determine where you rank on those. And then the Ivy League class also is connections in politics and how close ties you have to the establishment elite. Even if you're not in it, if you are the lawyer who handles their legal affairs, or you are the wealth manager who manages their money for the big bank, then you are higher on the rank. It's basically your proximity to the establishment elite measures whether the people who are closer to them and when we went to school with them through the Ivy Leagues are the Ivy League class, and then the ones who didn't are further away and they have a few degrees of separation, they're in the institutional professional class. So basically your degrees of separation from the establishment elite is how you know where you're at. So yeah, that sounds great in theory, but how can I tell where I'm at, not just on money? If class isn't solely just determined on income or education like lower and middle class people believe it to be, how do I know what class I am actually in? First, you can look at certain things outside of your route to income. And I'll just use myself, for example. Like I'm in the independent professional class. I am an entrepreneur. I don't have a single source of income or a single employer. I have multiple clients. And my revenue from my clients is what keeps me afloat. And then my father was a member of the independent professional class. He owned his own business. My grandfather was when he owned his own medical practice, and my great-grandfather was when he moved from Italy to the States and had started a canned food factory in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I'm from multi-generational independent professional class, and the values I kind of learned from that is that whether it's taught or not, because ironically, my parents wanted me to go on the institutional track because it's perceived to be safer. Actually, a lot of people in the independent professional classes encourage their children to go in the institutional class because they don't want them to deal with the same kind of risk and volatility of incomes that they had to deal with. So, but the thing is that the idea that one, you're never going to really advance just simply on a salary alone. The thing I learned is that you just have to always look at where kind of opportunities are from a business world. And if you want to be independent, you use your career as a member of the institutional professional class or the middle class as an opportunity to learn skills that you can convert into building your own practice. And yeah, it also influenced political views. Like if you you're somewhat influenced by this too. But yeah, it's just that I knew that like there are up months and up years and down months and down years. Like if my families had a good year in their businesses, whether both my parents were independent professional classes in their careers, then Christmas would be a little bit more extravagant and nicer. And if there's a down year, then it would be a little bit more austere. And then same like with vacations or contributions to college or whatever it is. Like it was very like your income as somebody in the independent professional class is a lot more cyclical, and it impacts the way you look at the world. You feel things are not permanent necessarily. It's not as bad as the situation that's precariat. It's actually because there's a lot more upside. It's like the precariat except with upside. And if you can save during those good times, you can weather the storm better than a precariat who his salary is relatively fixed. And so they just survive in good times, and in bad times, they risk falling into the underclass. But yeah, that's just an example. That's how I know where I am placed. But the thing is also you generally know where you're placed though, not just on your upbringing and your background, your attitudes on money. Your attitude on money is often where you view your class. People on the bottom tend to have a hostile view towards money and have a much more scarcity mentality. I'm not saying that there's not justifiable reasons for that, but that is another common trend. The middle class tends to have a more insecure view of their position. Like, look at your class's insecurity. Like, My insecurities in the independent middle professional class was having to go be stuck at a corporate job. The insecurity of the middle class is that their pay goes down because of inflation, whether or not, or a struggling economy, and they become precariat because their expenses go up faster than their income. The concern of the precariat is that they just lose their jobs outright and they can't find a replacement and they fall into the underclass. The concerns of the Ivy League class is that they lose their prestige and they lose their degree of connection to the elites, and so they're moving down. So whatever your insecurities are in terms of your financial and social standing, you're usually one class above what you're afraid of moving down to. And so a lot of people think they're a higher class than they actually are. But think about what is that you're really worried about. Like, a middle class person is not afraid of being stuck in the welfare trap their whole life, generally. A independent professional class person is not not afraid of becoming the precariat. You kind of know where you are based on what your fears are. Your fears are generally one class below you actually are. The other thing is socialization. Who do you get along with socially? Usually people in the same classes socialize with each other, or on the ones at least on the same track when you get to the levels independent professional class and above. Also, the other thing to look at is the differences between certain classes is that what are they trying to strive for too? That's the other way to look at it, is the inverse of what you're afraid to fall down to. What do you strive to? A lot of the people, not everybody's trying to become establishment elite, because most people just simply don't believe they can get there. And if somebody in the working class says, like, I want to become the next great billionaire, their family, despite the American dream saying otherwise, and their friends are probably going to laugh them out of the room. Whereas if you were one class below, it becomes more attainable to get to that level. Like, my goal has been to become in the successful business owner and counter elite classes, because those are just they are just kind of the scale of the background I had. If I just was able to do it a little bit better, I could theoretically get to those levels. They were, they didn't reach. Whereas an ambitious person in the middle class, their goal might be to get to the professional class. So that's another way to look at it. But the point I'm making is that socialization levels. The people in the classes tend to socialize with their own class. And even if their income is not necessarily in line, because again, class is not the same as income. You could be an independent professional class who's making the same amount as a precariat or making the same amount as an Ivy League class. So it's more of, again, where the money is coming from and your relationship to it, and just your worldview and your belief on where you can go and what kind of lessons and mannerisms and proprieties that you've gained that you can communicate with people. My social circle is in the independent professional class. Like, it can be my friends are from very different backgrounds in terms of ethnicity, age group, education level. But the one thing that most of my social circle has in common is they're in the independent professional classes. They've started their own business, or they have a profession that is very performance-based compensation. And why? Because I can kind of relate more to what they're going through and their struggles. Whereas somebody who's been in corporate America for 15 years and is not really worried about keeping their client base or growing a business, and they're just kind of have their very fixed hours and their very fixed schedule, and they have their very fixed vacation time, it makes it harder for me to relate to them. It makes them harder for them to relate to me. And also just it makes it more difficult because they're not running literally on the same schedules. Yeah, and it works the other way too. Like the establishment elite, I don't think I have ever met anybody in the establishment elite in my life. Actually, I don't take that back. I've met people in the establishment elite just if they're speakers at conferences or things like that. But I've never really gotten to know any of them on a real deep level in the United States. I've known people who used to be in those and were kicked out in the counter elite. And those are kind of more the people I know would be considered older money, or people who've been some reason booted out of the establishment elite, whether it's their politics or familial disputes or other things like that. But they tend to stick to themselves, and they live a very different life that I probably cannot relate to. And if I try to go, say, 2 rungs down on the class side, it's the same thing. And this is kind of how you know where you are. Look at who your friends are. Your friends are mostly middle class professionals? You are middle class. If your friends, and I'm talking about friends primarily that you met after you graduated from university, or if you didn't go to college, after high school, like when you started working full time, who is your circle? Because in university is kind of the one place where people of all class backgrounds meet and socialize. But after university, when you go back to your old life, or you take on your professional background based on the network that you gained or the merit that has allowed you to move up, then you kind of have a better idea of what class you are in. And you see this a lot of new money people who came from class, middle class, independent professional class backgrounds. They get counter elite rich, but they cannot necessarily connect with the establishment elite just because they maintain the same values from the class they grew up in. And they may not even relate to other counter elites or children of them because, again, they grew up in a different mindset. So money is not necessarily the answer. There's a lot of working class people who are making six figures or multiple six figures or even seven figures. But then they become into the successful business owner class and sometimes have a hard time socializing with their peers on an income level because of a different upbringing. However, America is generally a lot more tolerant on this, and you can use your money to kind of buy your way in social circles, especially on the counter elite side. So it's not as debilitating. Like if you did that in Europe, for example, or in Asia or Latin America, the social class non-monetary barriers are a lot higher than in the United States. That's what makes the United States particularly a great country, is that you have class structure, but you have more mobility, not just in economic, but in social assimilation too. So yeah, just look at who your friends are. Like my friends, again, are mostly other small business owners or professionals who have more flexible schedules and are more compensated based on performance. And so as a result, I know kind of what class I'm in. I'm in the independent professional class. And yeah, look at who I spend my time with. Is also I go to a lot of events and do a lot of activities to grow my business that coincidentally run into other people who have businesses that might be cooperative with mine. And then I make friends that way socially. So yeah, whereas if you work in the Ivy League class, for example, and you work at these prestigious investment banks or law firms or other related companies, your friends are your coworkers or colleagues you meet at industry events or vendor companies or whatever, and you become friends through those events and through those socializations, and therefore your friends all become fellow Ivy League class people. And then they have the alumni clubs and things like that too. And working class, it's the same thing. There's a natural self-sorting. So if you know where you stand, if you know where your friends stand, there's a good chance you know where you stand. There are some people I know, particularly in the counter elites and the successful business owner classes, who make it a priority to befriend people of other classes so they can keep themselves humble, or just because they like diversity of thought. And if you hang out with people with a similar class background with you, you tend to develop your own bubble. And there are people who don't want to be stuck in a bubble. And there are interesting people of all social classes. And yeah, that's also something I've learned from this channel. I've interacted with people of all social classes who I probably would naturally not run into in my independent professional class bubble. And that's helped expand my education in a good way. So there are people who try to do that. But for the most part, people tend to sort among their own. And so if you look at your social circle, your views on money, and the way you make your money, you've got a pretty good idea where you are. And if you have a good idea where you are, then you can take the next steps to moving up the ladder. If you have any direct questions and you want to learn more about how you can move yourself up the class ladder or prevent yourself from falling down, or just have any questions about your finances or investments or the markets or anything like that, feel free to contact me directly via email or through my website. And if you have your comments, what class are you in? Where do you think you sort in the hierarchy? And where are your friends' classes in the hierarchy? And if you are somebody who has friends in a different class, what was the moment that you recognized that? Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this video to be educational.